Orenthal James Simpson, born July 9, 1947, is an American former football running back, broadcaster, and actor. Born and raised in San Francisco, California, Simpson is a son of Eunice Nay Durden, a hospital administrator, and Jimmy Lee Simpson, a chef and bank custodian. Simpson attended the University of Southern California, USC, where he played football for the USC Trojans and won the Heisman Trophy in 1968. He played professionally as a running back in the National Football League for 11 seasons, primarily with the Buffalo Bills from 1969 to 1977. He became the first NFL player to rush for more than 2,000 yards in a season. Simpson was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 1983 and the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1985. After retiring from football, he began new careers in acting and football broadcasting. At age 19 on June 24, 1967, Simpson married Marguerite L. Whitley. Together, they had 3 children, Arnell L. Simpson, Jason Lamar Simpson, and Aaron Lashone Simpson. In August 1979, Aaron drowned in the family's swimming pool. Nicole Brown met O.J. Simpson in 1977, when she was 18 and working as a waitress at the Daisy, a Beverly Hills private club, and they began dating even though Simpson was already married. Simpson filed for divorce from his first wife in March 1979 and married Brown on February 2, 1985. Brown and Simpson went on to have 2 children, Sydney in 1985 and Justin in 1988. According to Dr. Lenore Walker, the Simpson-Brown marriage was a textbook example of domestic abuse. Brown signed a prenuptial agreement and was prohibited from working while married. She wrote that she felt conflicted about notifying the police of the abuse because she was financially dependent on Simpson. Brown described an incident in which Simpson broke her arm during a fight. In order to prevent him from being arrested, she had told emergency room staff that she had fallen off her bike. She wrote about him beating her in public, during sex and even in front of family and friends. Of the 62 incidents of abuse, the police were notified 8 times and Simpson was arrested once. On February 25, 1992, Brown filed for divorce citing irreconcilable differences. Brown said that Simpson stalked and harassed her after they divorced, an intimidation tactic meant to force the victim to return to the abuser. She documented an incident in which he spied on her having sex with her new boyfriend. Afterwards, Brown said she felt her life was in danger because Simpson had threatened to kill her if he ever found her with another man, and she also drafted a will. Brown telephoned Sojourn, a women's shelter, on June 8, 1994. She was considering staying at the shelter because she was afraid of what Simpson might do to her, as she was refusing his pleas to reconcile their marriage and had reported a set of keys missing from her house a few weeks earlier. The keys were later found on Simpson when he was arrested for the murders of Brown and Ron Goldman. On the evening of June 12, 1994, Brown and Simpson both attended the daughter Sydney's dance recital at Paul Revere Middle School. Afterwards, Brown and her family went to eat at Metzaluna restaurant. They did not invite Simpson to join them. One of the waiters at the restaurant was Ron Goldman, who had become close friends with Brown in recent weeks, but was not assigned to the Brown family's table. Brown and her children then went to Ben and Jerry's before returning to Brown's condominium in Bundy Drive, Brentwood. The manager of Metzaluna recounted that Brown's mother telephoned the restaurant at 9:37 p.m. about a pair of lost eyeglasses. The manager found the glasses and put them in a white envelope, which Goldman took with him as he left the restaurant at the end of his shift at 9:50 p.m., intending to drop it off at Brown's place. Meanwhile, Simpson ate takeout food from McDonald's with Kato Kaelin, a bit-part actor and family friend who had been given the use of a guest house on Simpson's estate. Rumors circulated that Simpson had been on drugs at the time of the murder, and the New York Post's Cindy Adams reported that the pair had actually gone to a local Burger King, where a prominent drug dealer known only as JR had admitted to selling them crystal meth. Brown's neighbors testified that they heard profuse barking coming from outside throughout the night, beginning around 10:15 p.m. Around 10:55 p.m., a dogwalker who lived a few blocks away from Brown came across Brown's Akita dog barking in the street outside her home. The Akita, whose legs were covered in blood, followed the man home. He tried to walk the dog back to where he found it, but the dog resisted. Later on, he left the Akita with a neighboring couple who offered to keep the dog overnight. As the dog was agitated, the couple decided to walk it back to where it had been found. Around midnight, as they reached the area where the Akita had been found, the dog stopped outside Brown's home and the couple saw Brown's body lying outside the house. Police called to the scene found Goldman's body near Brown's. The front door to Brown's condominium was open when the bodies were found, but there were no signs that anyone had entered the building, by breaking in or otherwise. Brown's body was lying face down and barefoot at the bottom of the stairs leading to the door. The walkway leading to the stairs was covered in blood, but the soles of Brown's feet were clean. Based on this evidence, investigators concluded that she was the first person to be killed and the intended target. She had been stabbed multiple times in the head and neck, but there were few defensive wounds on her hands, implying a short struggle to investigators. The final wound inflicted ran deep into her neck, severing her carotid artery. A large bruise in the center of her upper back indicated to investigators that, after killing Goldman, the assailant returned to Brown's body, stood on her back, pulled her head back by the hair and slit her throat. Her larynx could be seen through the gaping wound in her neck, and vertebra C3 was incised. Brown's head barely remained attached to her body. Goldman's body lay nearby, close to a tree and the fence. He had been stabbed multiple times in the body and neck, but there were relatively few defensive wounds on his hands, signifying a short struggle to investigators. Forensic evidence from the Los Angeles County coroner alleged that the assailant stabbed Goldman with one hand while holding him in a chokehold. Near Goldman's body were a blue knit cap, a left-hand extra-large Aris Isotona light leather glove, and the envelope containing the glasses that he was returning. A trail of the assailant's bloody shoe prints ran through the back gate. To the left of some of the prints were drops of blood from the assailant, who was apparently bleeding from the left hand. Measuring the distance between the prints indicated that the assailant walked rather than ran away from the scene. A few months before the murders, Simpson completed a film pilot for Frogman, an adventure series similar to the A-Team. Simpson played the lead role of Bullfrog Burke, who led a group of former U.S. Navy SEALs. He received a fair amount of military training, including use of a knife for Frogman, and holds a knife to the throat of a woman playing the role of his daughter in one scene. A 25-minute tape of the pilot, which did not include the knife scene, was found by investigators and watched on Simpson's television as they searched his house. The defense tried to block its use on these grounds, but Judge Ito allowed the tape to be shown. However, the prosecution never introduced it as evidence during the trial. It was reported that among the skills of the character of Bullfrog Burke was night killings and the silent kill technique of slashing the throat, and that SEALs regularly wear knit caps like the one found at the scene. The Navy calls these watch caps. After learning that Brown was the female victim, LAPD Commander Keith Bushy ordered detectives Tom Lang, Philip Vanater, Ron Phillips and Mark Furman to notify Simpson of her death and to escort him to the police station to pick up the former couple's children, who were asleep in Brown's condominium at the time of the murders. The detectives buzzed the intercom at Simpson's estate for over 30 minutes but received no response. They noted that Simpson's car was parked at an awkward angle, with its back end out more than the front, and that there was blood on the door, which they feared meant someone inside might be hurt. Vanater instructed Furman to scale the wall and unlock the gate to allow the other three detectives to enter. The detectives would argue they entered without a search warrant because of exigent circumstances, specifically out of fear that someone inside might be injured. Furman briefly interviewed Kalin, who told the detective that the car belonged to Simpson and that earlier that night, he had heard thumps on his wall. In a walk around the premises to inspect what may have caused the thumps, Furman discovered a blood-stained right-hand glove, which was determined to be the mate of the left-hand glove found next to the body of Goldman. This evidence was determined to be probable cause to issue an arrest warrant for Simpson. Phillips testified that when he called Simpson in Chicago to tell him of Brown's murder, Simpson sounded very upset but was oddly unconcerned about the circumstances of her death. Phillips noted that Simpson only asked if the children had seen the murder or Brown's body, but was not concerned about whether the assailants had harmed the children either. The police contacted Simpson at his home on June 13 and took him to Parker Center for questioning. Lang noticed that Simpson had a cut on a finger on his left hand that was consistent with where the killer was bleeding from, and asked Simpson how he got the cut. At first, Simpson claimed he cut his finger accidentally while in Chicago after learning of Brown's death. Lang then informed Simpson that blood was found inside his car. At this point, Simpson admitted that he had cut his finger on June 12, but said he did not remember how. He voluntarily gave some of his own blood for comparison with evidence collected at the crime scene and was released. Following perfunctory questioning by police detectives, Simpson was formally charged with the murders on June 17, 1994, after investigators found a blood-stained glove on his property. After he did not turn himself in at the agreed time, he became the object of a low-speed pursuit in a white 1993 Ford Bronco SUV owned and driven by his friend Al Cowlings. TV stations interrupted coverage of the 1994 NBA Finals to broadcast live coverage of the pursuit, which was watched by an estimated 95 million people. The pursuit and Simpson's subsequent arrest were among the most widely publicized events in American history. Simpson was represented by a high-profile defense team, also referred to as the Dream Team, which was initially led by Robert Shapiro and subsequently directed by Johnny Cochran. The team also included F. Lee Bailey, Alan Dershowitz, Robert Kardashian, Sean Holley, Carl E. Douglas, and Gerald Uelman. Barry Scheck and Peter Neufeld were two additional attorneys who specialized in DNA evidence. Deputy District Attorneys Marcia Clark, William Hodgman and Christopher Darden believed they had a strong case against Simpson. The prosecution argued that the domestic violence within the Simpson-Brown marriage culminated in her murder. Simpson's history of abusing Brown resulted in their divorce and him pleading guilty to one count of domestic violence in 1989. On the night of the murders, Simpson attended a dance recital for his daughter and was reportedly angry with Brown because of a black dress that she wore, which he said was tight. Simpson's then-girlfriend, Paula Barbieri, wanted to attend the recital with Simpson but he did not invite her. After the recital, Simpson returned home to a voicemail from Barbieri ending their relationship. The prosecution stated that Simpson then drove over to Brown's home to reconcile their relationship as a result, and when Brown refused, Simpson killed her in a final act of control. Goldman then came upon the scene and was murdered as well. Christopher Darden surprised Marcia Clark by asking Simpson to try on the gloves found at the crime scene and his home. The prosecution had earlier decided against asking Simpson to try them on because they had been soaked in blood from Simpson, Brown and Goldman, and frozen and unfrozen several times. The leather gloves appeared too tight for Simpson to put on easily, especially over the latex gloves he wore underneath. Clark claimed that Simpson was acting when he appeared to be struggling to put on the gloves. The prosecution stated they believed the gloves shrank from having been soaked in the blood of the victims. Richard Rubin, former vice president of glove maker Aris Isotoner Inc., which makes the gloves in question, testified on September 12, 1995, that the gloves had indeed shrunk from their original size. He stated, the gloves in the original condition would easily go onto the hand of someone of Mr. Simpson's size. Darden then produced a new pair of the same type of gloves, which fitted Simpson when he tried them on. The prosecution presented a total of 108 exhibits, including 61 drops of blood, of DNA evidence allegedly linking Simpson to the murders. With no witnesses to the crime, the prosecution was dependent on DNA as the only physical evidence linking Simpson to the crime. The volume of DNA evidence in this case was unique, and the prosecution believed they could reconstruct how the crime was committed with enough accuracy to resemble an eyewitness account. Marcia Clark stated in her opening statements that there was a trail of blood from the Bundy crime scene through Simpson's Ford Bronco to his bedroom at Rockingham. Simpson's DNA was found on blood drops next to the bloody footprints near the victims at the Bundy crime scene. Probability of error was 1 in -9.7 billion. Simpson's DNA was found on a trail of blood drops leading away from the victims, towards and on the back gate at Bundy. Probability of error was 1 in 200. Simpson, Goldman and Brown's DNA was found on blood on the outside of the door and inside Simpson's Bronco. Probability of error was 1 in 21 billion. Simpson's DNA was found on blood drops leading from the area where his Bronco was parked at Simpson's Rockingham home to the front door entrance. Simpson, Brown and Goldman's DNA was on a bloody glove found behind his home. Simpson and Brown's DNA was found on blood on a pair of socks in Simpson's bedroom. Probability of error was 1 in -6.8 billion. LAPD criminalist and hair fiber expert Susan Brockbank testified on June 27, 1995, and FBI special agent and fiber expert Doug Diedrich testified on June 29, 1995, to the following findings: the fibers from the glove found at Simpson's home microscopically match the one found at the crime scene, proving they were each other's mate. Both of the victims, the two gloves, and the blue knit cap worn by the killer had hair consistent with Simpson. The hair in the blue knit cap worn by the killer was embedded in the seams, indicating it was there from being worn repeatedly. Dark blue cotton clothing fibers were found on both victims. The video from the dance recital that Simpson attended earlier that night shows him wearing a similarly colored shirt. Kato Kaelin testified that Simpson was still wearing that shirt when they got home from McDonald's, but not anymore when he answered the door for the limousine driver. The police searched his home, but the shirt was never found. Hair consistent with Goldman was found on Brown, and clothing fibers consistent with Brown was found on Goldman. This supported the prosecution's theory that the assailant killed Brown first, then Goldman, and afterwards returned to Brown to cut her throat. The hair consistent with Brown that was found on the Rockingham glove was torn, which also supports the prosecution claim that the killer grabbed Brown by her hair to cut her throat. Fibers that were only used in the 1993-1994 model year Ford Bronco, the same car that Simpson owns, were found on both victims, the knit cap, and on both gloves. The glove found at Simpson's home that belonged to the murderer had hair and clothing fibers consistent with Simpson, Brown and Goldman, as well as fibers from a 1993-1994 Ford Bronco and Brown's Akita dog. Cochran was able to convince the jury that there was reasonable doubt concerning the DNA evidence in this case, which was a relatively new form of evidence in trials at that time. The reasonable doubt theory included evidence that the blood sample had allegedly been mishandled by lab scientists and technicians, and there were questionable circumstances that surrounded other court exhibits. Cochran and the defense team alleged that there had been misconduct by the LAPD related to systemic racism and incompetence, in particular actions and comments of Detective Mark Furman. At 10:07 a.m. on Tuesday, October 3, 1995, Simpson was acquitted on both counts of murder. The jury arrived at the verdict by 3 p.m. on October 2, after 4 hours of deliberation, but it postponed the announcement. After the verdict was read, juror number 9, 44-year-old Lionel Cryer, gave Simpson a Black Power raised fist salute. The New York Times reported that Cryer was a former member of the revolutionary nationalist Black Panther Party that prosecutors had inexplicably left on the panel. The trial became historically significant because of the reaction to the verdict. Although the nation observed the same evidence presented at trial, a division along racial lines emerged in observers' opinion of the verdict, which the media dubbed the racial gap. A poll of Los Angeles County residents showed that most African Americans felt that justice had been served by the not guilty verdict, while the majority of whites and Latinos felt it was a racially motivated jury nullification by a mostly African American jury. More recent polling shows the gap has narrowed since the trial, with over half of polled black respondents in 2013 stating they believed Simpson was guilty. Despite Simpson's acquittal of the two murder charges, Police Chief Willie Williams indicated that he had no plans to reopen the investigation, saying of the acquittals, "It doesn't mean there's another murderer." As of April 2001, Los Angeles Police Department homicide detective Vic Pietrantoni was assigned to the Simpson-Goldman case. In the February 1998 issue of Esquire, Simpson was quoted as saying, "Let's say I committed this crime. Even if I did this, it would have to have been because I loved her very much, right?" In April 1998, Simpson did an interview with talk show host Ruby Wax. In an apparent joke, Simpson showed up at her hotel room claiming to have a surprise for her, and suddenly waved a banana about his head, as if it were a knife, and pretended to stab Wax with it. The footage soon made its way onto U.S. television networks, causing outrage. In February 2001, Simpson was arrested in Miami-Dade County, Florida, for simple battery and burglary of an occupied conveyance, for yanking the glasses off another motorist during a traffic dispute 3 months earlier. If convicted, Simpson could have faced up to 16 years in prison, but he was tried and quickly acquitted of both charges in October 2001. On the night of September 13, 2007, a group of men led by Simpson entered a room at the Palace Station Hotel Casino and took sports memorabilia at gunpoint, which resulted in Simpson being questioned by police. Simpson admitted to taking the items, which he said had been stolen from him, but denied breaking into the hotel room. He also denied that he or anyone else carried a gun. He was released after questioning. 2 days later, Simpson was arrested and initially held without bail. Along with 3 other men, Simpson was charged with multiple felony counts, including criminal conspiracy, kidnapping, assault, robbery, and using a deadly weapon. Bail was set at $125,000, with stipulations that Simpson have no contact with the co-defendants and that he surrender his passport. Simpson did not enter a plea. Simpson and his co-defendant were found guilty of all charges on October 3, 2008. Simpson faced a possible life sentence with parole on the kidnapping charge, and mandatory prison time for armed robbery. On December 5, 2008, Simpson was sentenced to a total of 33 years in prison. On July 31, 2013, the Nevada Parole Board granted Simpson parole on some convictions, but his imprisonment continued based on the weapons and assault convictions. The board considered Simpson's prior record of criminal convictions and good behavior in prison in coming to the decision. At his parole hearing on July 20, 2017, the board decided to grant Simpson parole. He was released on October 1, 2017, having served almost 9 years. Thanks for watching. For more videos, please click like and subscribe.